150 grand for a 32-footer from 1979. You might think I'm kidding. It seems a bit ridiculous. But wait, there are some very surprising reasons for all this priciness. Sitting in Indiantown, Florida right now is such a one-of-a-kind masterpiece that we absolutely have to take a look to see what all the fuss is about. So picture this, you're standing on the dock looking at a 32-foot boat with a fat, curvy hull, a long keel that screams old school, and a reputation that's, well, kind of legendary. That's the Westsail 32. Sometimes you'll hear it called the Shipmaster, a boat that basically put the dream of world cruising in the hands of everyday people back in the 70s. Now let's rewind. This Westsail 32 didn't come out of just nowhere. Its roots go way back to Norway and a guy called Colin Archer. Archer designed double-ended rescue boats that could take a beating in the North Sea. That design was later tweaked by American naval architects like William Atkin and eventually turned into this fiberglass cruising machine by Bill Krelock. You've probably heard of him. And when Westsail Corporation started cranking them out in the early 70s, they didn't just sell a boat in the advertising, they sold you a lifestyle. Their ads promised you could sail off into the sunset, and about 830 people bought into that dream to get their hands on this boat. Half of those were boats that were finished at the factory, and the other half were kits. This was a big deal in the 70s. You could get your Westsail 32 and build the interior and the deckwork yourself. So some Westsail 32s might have beautiful mahogany antique interiors, and others might look like they were built in somebody's high school wood shop. It really depends on who built the boat, but the hull was built like a tank. We're talking multiple layers of fiberglass, nearly an inch thick of solid glass in some spots. That's why people say the Westsail 32 is almost indestructible. You can run it aground, you can ride out a gale, or load it down with gear for circumnavigation, and the boat kind of just shrugs that kind of stuff off. Now, some specs for the sailors out there. LOA, 32 feet. Beam, surprisingly wide, 11 feet. Draft is 5 foot even. Displacement is nearly 20,000 pounds, and that's a lot for a 32-footer. Usually the 42s are 20,000 pounds. And ballast, about 7,000 pounds of that is lead to keep this thing steady. On deck, you'll usually find a cutter rig that's 2 head sails plus the main. It's a flexible setup that makes heavy weather sailing a whole lot easier. You also usually find a wind vane on the back like this boat has. The trade-off here with this rig is speed. It isn't a light air wind flyer. In fact, sailors often joke that a Westsail 32 won't leave the dock unless there's at least 15 knots of breeze. But if you give it that wind, it'll chug along all day like a freight train. Steady, predictable, and comfortable. And comfort is kind of the key to this boat. The Westsail 32 has a reputation for being a passage maker. It'll track straight, it doesn't get knocked around very easy, and it has one of the highest comfort ratios of any production sailboat of this size. The translation is, when the seas get ugly, you'll be sipping coffee in the cockpit while faster boats are getting hammered by waves. The owners of this boat specifically say Montana, as she's called now, formerly called Endurance, is the most stunning example of a Westsail 32 Shipmaster available anywhere in the world. Originally manufactured as Hull 802 near the end of the run in 1979, Endurance began a total and complete refit and manufacturing program in the year 2000. The refit and remanufacturing was completed in 2006 by Manchester Marine with the assistance of manufacturing managers at both Hinckley and Pacific Seacraft. The vessel was completely disassembled and all legacy equipment, systems, electrical, plumbing, rigging, and machinery were removed and either sold or discarded. Endurance was then manufactured with the legendary Westsail hull and deck to the highest quality standards of modern boat builders. Endurance is now offered as essentially a new yacht with quality modern systems and rigging. All new hull and deck hardware and equipment. The exterior underwater hull gel coat was removed. 6 coats of epoxy resin and 2 coats of epoxy paint were applied to prevent hull blistering, followed by multiple coats of bottom paint. New Groco US-sourced bronze through-hull fittings and ball valve seacocks were installed throughout. The hull and deck were painted with all grip. Rudder and gudgeons are all new, bronze bolts were installed, the entire bilge was ground to fiberglass to remove the original paint, and 3 coats of epoxy applied. All hardware, handrails were installed using the Hinckley process. The teak deck was refurbished, all the seams sealed, and teak deck system caulking was applied to the entire deck. The Beta Marine was installed, the BV1505 37.5 horse engine with oversized engine mounting plates, and it was installed with 2 new aluminum tanks to give you 68 gallons of fuel and fuel level sensors. The engine room blower, fuel lines were installed, new control panel, filters, stern fitting, propeller shaft, cutlass bearing, prop, with in-cockpit controls and gauges all brand new, and the engine was laser aligned. It has low hours, just 430, and it's very well maintained. There's beautifully varnished teak and mahogany throughout the interior, cast bronze elliptical opening ports throughout the cabin, and polished stainless complementing the beauty of the inside of this boat. The cabin sole is crafted from 1-inch thick teak and holly throughout the boat. Overhead is painted tongue and groove ash with deck beams. All opening lockers doors feature positive locks to prevent inadvertent opening in a seaway, and all drawers are sealed inside to prevent mold. The large V-berth cabin has filler cushion and new memory foam mattress. Enclosed head and shower area with a bureau to starboard opposite the head, featuring varnished veneer countertops, 4 drawers, a locker below, and an adjacent cedar closet. The galley countertop is granite, the sink is polished stainless, and there's all kinds of brass hardware down here to be absolutely as beautiful as possible. A whole bunch of upgrades were done to this boat. The hydro vane self-steering they put on in 2023. A year later, they put a couple hundred watts of solar. There's a 3rd reef added to the mainsail. New running rigging in 24. Obviously, engine is relatively new with 430 hours. It's got an AIS transmitter and receiver. A dinghy is included that's never been used. A new 6-person life raft. For all intents and purposes, this is a brand new 1979 Westsail 32. Everything remanufactured to make it brand new again, better than ever with new manufacturing processes. I bet you that refit was at least $100,000 on its own. So the question becomes, would you pay 150 grand for all this ocean going, travel the world, be totally off-grid awesomeness, or would you spend your 150 grand on something more modern? I love the idea of this Westsail, and I hope somebody buys it and sails it around the world a few times. This boat comes from a time before all the white plastic production boats, before we had GPS, before we had water makers and Starlink and instant communication, and before we had weather forecasts that were good for any more than 4 or 5 days. So it's designed to be completely independent out in the ocean. It's designed to handle anything the weather might throw at you, because back then we didn't know what the weather was going to throw at us. This boat comes from a time before all the modern safety features that we love today. Let me know in the comments what you think of it, and hit the thumbs up if you like these older sailboats. The mission here at Lady K Sailing has always been to get more people sailing more easily, and I sure couldn't do it without you guys. A big shout out to the patrons who, for as little as a couple of bucks an episode, make it possible for me to make these videos. If you'd like to help with that mission of getting more people sailing, please consider becoming a patron. Until next time, friends, keep the heavy side down, but not too far down. I love you guys.